All right, let's start. Hi, my name is Louis, and my collaborator, Dr. Yanis Bardakos, couldn't be here today, but also speaking for him as well. I'll be talking very briefly about our art project at Funkhouse. Perhaps some of you have seen Moist Cryptography, and some other things behind the scenes there, and particularly answering a question: what are the implications of ZK in art? I think that's the primary thing I want to address, but I'll kind of circumambulate the entire project. So yeah, I want to start with this quote from Picasso that art is a lie that makes us realize truth. And so if we're trying to think about how can zero knowledge be used in an artistic way, I think it's precisely in this tension between what is hidden and revealed. And this as an entirely new medium that we can create with. And so I want to maybe share with you a bit how I thought about exploring this in this project. Okay, so yeah, this is our project, Moist Cryptography. Before we talk about the sculptures, well, okay, maybe I'll talk a bit about the concept. So originally we're thinking about this speculative future, because we're thinking deeply about like biometrics and on-chain biometric systems and blockchain as a new nature. And what are the consequences of that? What might a future look like when like immutable ledger technologies are so pervasive in our lives, perhaps in our bodies, that they constitute for us a new nature. And perhaps as we, with various systems, start to tie our own, not just financial, but personal, and then more like a biometric, and perhaps soon enough like cognitive data into blockchain systems, what might be the consequences of that? And so on one far end of that spectrum, we have this notion of like a solved entity, or let's say an entity whose entire cognitive light cone has been mapped by some outside computational force, essentially meaning that anything they could think, do, act has already been pre-computed. Now, does this entity have free will? Has anything subjectively changed for that entity, even if their entire possible actions and thoughts are already known by some outside entity? And what does that mean exactly? We see that this is one far end of what might occur when, let's say, all of one's biometrics are consumed. Let's say all the moisture of one's private organic data has been consumed and made dry. And so that was kind of the idea behind this, the skeletal sculpture of the solved one, especially with kind of the cables coming in and out. It's like a being, perhaps a human, that's been transfigured by systems of bioinformatic data capture to become a pass-through for some other system. So that was kind of like the idea there. And of course, we also have our orb, and our orb we built in design, so actually is running with a little NPU inside for face detection. And so this is how we're actually doing some biometric data capture, and this will go into how we're using ZK in the project as well. And let's see some more pictures. Let me get to the digital part. Okay, so we're doing a number of things with ZK here, and I thought art is a very interesting way to explore kind of the cutting edge of programmable cryptography, because otherwise perhaps like the industry use cases are still being developed. So there's a good opportunity to explore that. So particularly what I was interested in is zero knowledge machine learning as like a way to connect machine learning computations to the blockchain atomically. I thought that's quite fascinating. Perhaps it allows the blockchain to touch a whole new class of computations, or as it were, to like infect the logic of blockchain into more and more off-chain systems. And as these systems become more efficient and there's more breakthroughs in the fundamental cryptographic layer, like more and more of these off-chain data sources and machine learning models and computations will be able to be verified on chain and essentially have the same guarantees as other smart contract systems. So what we did with the orb, we first do a facial capture and then run a facial discrimination model. and then a landmark model. And these are run in a zero-knowledge machine learning circuit. So essentially, it's downscaling a face image to a 48 by 48 pixel grid. Then it does the discriminator does a proof of face. So it's a small model, like, is this a face or not? So like, okay, now we know our data is like a verified face according to this model. And then from that verified face, we have landmark detection. So we can, okay, extract the eight segments of a face and have this data available as well. And so now with this data on the blockchain, is also interesting, like playing with the idea of the data provenance. Like, is it important that these pixels perhaps came from this face, this person, this image? And if we track the movement of that data, does that make those pixels any more or less interesting or perhaps valuable? And how can we transform and mutate those verified biometric or moist pixels into something new or something that kind of transcends its source material? It's also kind of getting at the, how is our biometric data used and stored and manipulated, perhaps by us and largely by other entities, and perhaps it takes on an entirely new life of its own, and perhaps thinking about our relationship to our own biodata. So yeah, here we can see our segmentation into like 8 different features. And then within the scope of contracts, it's okay, applies like a color palette at random to the segmentation. And then there's a process of like recombination. So for example, it's like a mutation. We can like remove a piece, add another piece. It's all the features themselves are individual tokens that can be sent and received, and then composed within this 48 by 48 pixel grid to create some new image. But all of this is done also within a zero-knowledge circuit such that the data itself is private. So essentially, if you're familiar with like a ZK-POD system, there's like a one-time pad key on chain for like a Planckish system that's exchanged to do, or even like FHE, like some off-chain, back and forth between 2 entities, and then they, reveal a one-time pad that allows like someone to receive money and another person to receive data in a trustless way. So essentially, we packed just way more data into that key field, which is incredibly costly for gas on chain. So like even on Base, like might be over 10, 20 million gas, per transaction. So that's been fun trying to like, figure out, get by all the gas limitations. In order to keep this color data secret. And like, why would we want to keep this data secret? Well, going back to like, what can we do that's new or interesting with zero knowledge? It's like keeping something secret and revealing something else. So on one side, we have our private data. So this would be data that upon minting of an image that will be sent to, like, is encrypted by into someone's wallet by their public key. And then we have like a downscale on the other side. This is kind of like the shadow. So the shadow is another zero knowledge proof. It's a proof of that we have this private data and that we ran a certain computation on it. In this case, the computation is, we downscaled it and made it grayscale. So there's this more rich data that a user has access to in their wallet, and then there's a public shadow of that data that follows it around as it changes. And perhaps here we have like another kind of gallery of, okay, what transmutations might look like. And if you follow my cursor, this is what the public would see in the grayscale versus what the private sees until the final composition is revealed. And that could be also bridged to mainnet. So that's the basic, and this part is still in development, and hopefully we'll launch a testnet soon, because actually doing like zero knowledge machine learning and on-chain encryption and decryption is like quite a task, but we're almost there. I think the fundamentals are quite secure. So yeah, that's the digital part, and let's see. Yeah, we also have, I talk a bit more about some of the other sculptures. So we call all the sculptures together like the biometric ossuary. So there were the first 2 sculptures, the solved one skeleton and the orb, that were kind of part of our kind of original collection, and then the rest of them are kind of ancillary and kind of fleshing out our ossuary. And if you've seen the sculptures and the descriptions, it's kind of like a pastiche of the last 10 years of crypto art. And perhaps I can end more provocatively with, this period of crypto art as a movement in the last 10 years. I think it's well and fine to say now it's dead. Crypto art was a moment, and now we're in a post-crypto art era. And there was once it was interesting enough to make a token and play with the consequences of the blockchain as a token machine. And now that's all been taken up by much larger entities and is I think all of the consequences have been revealed. But the green field that I see in both crypto and crypto arts, or exploring blockchain as a medium, is programmable cryptography. So perhaps that's what I see as the post-crypto art era. And yeah, this perhaps was an homage, many of our individual skulls in the ossuary, to relics of this past and forgotten time. Okay, I can talk about one more thing. I want to talk about this guy Stellark. This guy, I saw him talk in Japan, and it was very influential on ideas. We're thinking about, what we want to do with this project, how we want to where we want to go with these ideas. And Stellark is a really great bioartist, and he grafted an ear onto his arm and has done all of these other things. But the way he thinks, and some other bioartists thinking about their relationship to, their relationship not just as an augmentation, okay, I made this arm, I put this thing on, it's a one-way augmentation of myself as a human, but more of what is my relationship to a system or a biosphere of my own chemical processes, and what are the feedback loops, and what does that entail? And I think bringing that thinking into the blockchain, or the blockchain as nature, was definitely pivotal in developing a lot of these ideas. And that's what, if you want to be one of our first Twitter followers, I'll leave that up, and maybe I can take any questions.
Just on a superficial, level, the two sculptures you have made, what are the materials you used?
So all of the sculptures are made were 3D printed in SLA, 2-meter print beds. Most of them are opaque resin, one with either a chrome plated or a black polished finish. One of them is refractive resin. That's the one that's translucent.
Awesome.
And with the orb, it's connected, has a Orange Pi 5 inside, and cameras, and some various electronics that make it operate.
And are those viewable today, or is it still work in progress?
No, all of the sculptures are up and at Funkhouse right now. And so perhaps I'll lead a small group there of anyone who hasn't seen it yet, and I can show them as well. Yeah, they're right here on site.
Any other questions? Well, then, thank you very much, Louis.
Thank you.